The pounding in his head was nothing compared to the shock that stopped his heart. Brett Chandler stumbled down the stairs, mouth dry, vision blurred. Last night was a fog of whiskey and tears he couldn't remember. Then he heard it. The sizzle of eggs, the rich smell of coffee. Someone was cooking in his kitchen. A woman he'd never seen before stood at his stove, red hair catching the morning light, still wearing a waitress uniform. She turned, smiled softly, and said the words that froze him in place. "Good morning. You don't remember anything, do you?" His son was upstairs, still asleep. His house was locked. And this stranger knew his name. But what she said next, about the night before, about Rachel, about the anniversary he tried to drown, that's what shattered him. Because some truths hurt more than hangovers. And some strangers see the pain you've been hiding for years. The sunlight streaming through the worn curtains felt like needles in Brett Chandler's eyes. He groaned, pressing his palms against his temples as consciousness dragged him back. His mouth tasted like copper and regret. The last time he'd felt this way was years ago, before Kenny was born, before Rachel died. The thought of her name sent a fresh wave of nausea through him, though he couldn't tell if it was the alcohol or the grief. Both, probably. They'd always been intertwined on this particular date. Fragments of last night drifted through his mind, like smoke. The corner booth at the Pine Corner. The amber liquid in his glass, refilled more times than he could count. And something else, something he couldn't quite grasp. A voice, soft and gentle. Hands helping him stand. But the details remained frustratingly out of reach, hidden behind the fog of too much whiskey and too much pain. Brett swung his legs over the bed, noticing he was still wearing yesterday's jeans and flannel shirt. He never slept in his clothes. Kenny would have laughed at him. The thought of his son sent a jolt of panic through him. Kenny. Where was Kenny? Then he heard it, a sound that had no business being in his house at 7 in the morning. The soft sizzle of something cooking, the gentle clatter of a spatula against a pan. And underneath it all, a scent that made his stomach growl despite his hangover. Fresh coffee, eggs, maybe bacon. Brett froze, his hand gripping the edge of the mattress. His mind raced through possibilities. Had Kenny come home early from his sleepover? No. His son was 8 years old and barely knew how to make cereal without supervision. A break-in? What kind of burglar made breakfast? He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly as the room tilted. Each step down the hallway felt like walking through deep water. The sounds from the kitchen grew clearer, humming, actually humming, a melody he didn't recognize. When he reached the bottom step and turned toward the kitchen, what he saw stopped him cold. A woman stood at his stove, her back to him. Red hair pulled into a loose ponytail, catching the light from the window above the sink. She wore a black and white uniform, the kind waitresses wore at diners and bars. Her movements were efficient, comfortable, like she'd cooked in this kitchen 100 times before. She flipped something in the pan with practiced ease, then reached for the coffee pot. Brett's coffee pot. In his kitchen, his voice came out rough, scraped raw by sleep and alcohol. "Who are you?" The words felt inadequate for the tsunami of confusion crashing through him. The woman turned, and Brett found himself staring at a face he should have recognized, but didn't. Not really. High cheekbones, a dusting of freckles across her nose, eyes the color of honey in sunlight. She was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of face that would be easy to overlook in a crowd, but impossible to forget once you really looked at it. She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made his chest ache. Kindness. Pure, uncomplicated kindness. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft and warm. "You don't remember anything, do you?" It wasn't accusatory, just a gentle observation, tinged with something that might have been sympathy. Brett opened his mouth, closed it again. His brain felt like it was moving through molasses, trying to connect dots that refused to line up. What are you doing in my house? He looked past her toward the hallway, panic rising again. Where's Kenny? Is he okay? Did something happen? His voice climbed higher with each question, and he started to move forward. But the woman raised one hand in a calming gesture. Her other hand set down the spatula, and she turned off the stove burner with the ease of someone who knew exactly where everything was. Kenny's fine, she said quickly. He's upstairs, still sleeping. I checked on him 20 minutes ago. He's safe, I promise. The relief that flooded through Brett nearly buckled his knees. He grabbed the doorframe for support, his breathing ragged. Then why? I don't understand. Who are you? How did you get in here? His eyes darted to the front door, still locked, chain in place. Nothing broken or disturbed. This made no sense. My name is Rosalie, she said. Rosalie Bennett. I work at the Pine Corner. I'm a waitress there. She paused, watching his face carefully. You come in every Saturday night. You always sit in the corner booth, order one whiskey, nurse it for an hour, then go home. Brett's mind spun. The Pine Corner. Yes, he knew that place. It was his Saturday ritual, the one night a week he allowed himself to sit somewhere other than his workshop or Kenny's bedroom. One drink, just enough to feel the edge blur, then home to his empty bed. Last night was different, Rosalie continued, her voice gentle but steady. You came in around 8, but you didn't order just one drink. She crossed her arms, not defensively but like she was holding herself together. You ordered 3, then 4. By the time we closed at 11, you were alone at your booth, staring at something in your wallet. You were crying. The words hit Brett like physical blows. He never cried in public. Never. He did his grieving in private, in the shower where Kenny couldn't hear. Rosalie took a small step forward, her eyes never leaving his face. When I came to tell you we were closing, you looked up at me and said, "It's my anniversary." Then you laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You said, 6 years married today, 3 years dead. Brett's hand flew to his wallet, still in his back pocket. He pulled it out with shaking fingers and flipped it open. There, tucked behind his driver's license, was the photo he looked at every Saturday. Rachel on their wedding day, sunlight in her blonde hair, laughing at something he'd said. You told me her name, Rosalie said softly. Rachel. You told me about the accident, how it happened on your anniversary, 3 years after you got married. How you were supposed to go out to dinner that night, but she never came home from work. Brett's throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This stranger knew his story, the story he told no one, the pain he kept locked away behind forced smiles and overtime hours. You said you couldn't save her, that you weren't there when she needed you most. The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the wall clock. Brett stared at this woman, Rosalie, trying to reconcile the kindness in her face with the bomb she'd just dropped into his morning. I said all that? His voice cracked. Last night? She nodded. And more. You talked about Kenny, about how hard it is to be both parents, about how you work yourself to exhaustion because if you stop moving, you start thinking. And thinking hurts too much. Brett's legs finally gave out. He sank into one of the kitchen chairs, his head in his hands. Shame burned through him, hot and acidic. He'd broken his own rule. He'd let the grief win. Worse, he'd done it in front of a stranger. How did I get home? The question came out muffled through his fingers. Did I drive? Please tell me I didn't drive. The thought of putting himself or others at risk made his stomach turn. No, Rosalie said quickly. I brought you home, in my car. She moved to the coffee pot and poured 2 mugs, setting one in front of him without asking. The gesture was so natural, so caring, that it made his chest ache again. You gave me your address when I asked. You were pretty out of it, but you were adamant about getting home to Kenny. You kept saying he needed you, that you had to be there when he woke up. Brett lifted his head to look at her. Really look at her this time. In the morning light, he could see the tiredness around her eyes, the way her uniform was wrinkled like she'd slept in it. Which she had, he realized. She'd stayed here, in his house, with him passed out drunk and Kenny asleep upstairs. You stayed all night? His voice was hoarse with emotion he couldn't name. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Rosalie wrapped her hands around her own coffee mug, her gaze dropping to the dark liquid. Because I do know you, she said quietly. Maybe not the details of your life, but I know you. I've watched you every Saturday for 6 months. You come in looking exhausted, order one drink, and sit there like you're carrying the weight of the world. You never smile. You never talk to anyone. You just exist. And then you go home. She looked up, meeting his eyes. Last night, I saw you break, and I couldn't just put you in a cab and hope you made it okay. Something in her words, in the way she said them, made Brett's throat tight. When was the last time someone had looked after him? Not Kenny. He did all the looking after in his son's life. Not his late in-laws, who'd moved to Florida after Rachel died, because staying in the same state was too painful. No one had cared for Brett Chandler in 3 years. He'd become so used to being alone that the simple act of someone making him breakfast felt like a miracle. You slept on the couch, he said, noticing the throw blanket folded neatly on the armrest. You didn't have to do that. Rosalie shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. Where else was I going to sleep? Your bed was occupied, and I wasn't going to drive home and leave you and Kenny alone. What if you'd gotten sick in your sleep? What if Kenny woke up and found you like that, not knowing what happened? The protectiveness in her voice when she mentioned Kenny hit Brett square in the chest. I don't know what to say, Brett admitted, his hand still wrapped around the coffee mug like it was an anchor. Thank you feels completely inadequate. Rosalie's smile widened, reaching her eyes this time. You're welcome, she said. But you should know. Kenny woke up about 20 minutes ago. He saw me in the kitchen and asked who I was. I told him I was a friend of yours from the restaurant, that you weren't feeling well, and I came by to help out. Brett's eyes widened. He didn't freak out, seeing a stranger in the house? Rosalie laughed, a sound like wind chimes. He's 8 years old. He asked if I could make pancakes. When I said yes, he went back to his room to play with his cars until breakfast was ready. He said, and I quote, Dad never makes pancakes. He says they always turn out lumpy. She gestured to the stove where a plate of perfect golden pancakes sat waiting. For the first time in recent memory, Brett felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. It felt foreign, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. They do turn out lumpy, he admitted. Every single time. Kenny eats them anyway, but I know they're terrible. He paused, studying Rosalie's face. You didn't have to do any of this. Stay here, make breakfast, lie to my kid to protect me. Why did you? The question hung in the air between them. Rosalie was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before, vulnerable. Because I know what it's like to be alone, she said. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning and no one notices. And I've been watching you drown every Saturday for half a year, Brett. Last night, you finally went under. I couldn't just walk away from that. Before he could respond, small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Dad, the pancake lady is still here. Kenny burst into the kitchen, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas. He skidded to a stop when he saw Brett at the table, his face breaking into a grin. Dad, you look terrible, it was said with all the brutal honesty of childhood, without malice or judgment. Brett managed a weak laugh. Thanks, buddy, I feel terrible. Kenny bounded over and climbed into his lap, something he still did, even though he was getting too big for it. Brett wrapped his arms around his son, breathing in the smell of sleep and little boy shampoo. This was why he kept going. Why he got up every morning and worked until his hands ached. Why he pushed down his grief and his exhaustion and his bone-deep loneliness. Kenny needed him. "Miss Rosalie makes really good pancakes," Kenny announced, twisting to look at the woman by the stove. "Can she come back and make them again?" Brett felt his face heat. "Kenny, that's not really—" But Rosalie cut him off with a laugh. "Tell you what," she said, crouching down to Kenny's level. "How about I teach your dad how to make them? Then he can make them for you whenever you want." Kenny's eyes went wide. "You'd do that?" Rosalie glanced at Brett, her eyes dancing with amusement. "I'm sure your dad is better than he thinks. Sometimes people just need someone to show them the right way." There was something in those words that felt like more than just cooking lessons, like she was talking about life, about grief, about learning to live again. Brett cleared his throat. "I should let you go. You probably need to get home, get some sleep. You've done more than enough." He stood, gently setting Kenny on his feet. "Let me at least pay you for your time, for the gas." Rosalie held up a hand, stopping him. "I don't want your money, Brett. I did this because I wanted to." She moved to the counter where a small purse sat and pulled out a pen and a receipt. Scribbling something on it, she handed it to him. "But if you ever want those pancake lessons, or if you just need someone to talk to, here's my number." Brett stared at the receipt in his hand. Her handwriting was neat, almost elegant. Below her phone number, she'd written, "For emergencies and pancakes. Rosalie." Something about the playfulness of it, the normalcy, made his eyes sting. When was the last time someone had offered him friendship? Real, uncomplicated human connection? "I work most evenings at the Pine Corner," Rosalie continued, "but I'm off on Sundays and Mondays. If you call, I'll answer." She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to look at him. Her expression was serious now, all traces of humor gone. "Brett, I don't know what you're going through. I can't imagine losing someone the way you lost Rachel. But I do know that you don't have to go through it alone." She glanced at Kenny, who was already investigating the plate of pancakes. "That little boy needs his dad, but he needs his dad to be okay, to be more than just surviving. You deserve more than one whiskey in a corner booth every Saturday. You deserve to be happy again." Before Brett could respond, she smiled one more time and slipped out the door. He stood there, frozen, the receipt clutched in his hand. Through the window, he watched her walk to an old sedan parked at the curb, get in, and drive away. Just like that, she was gone. But the kitchen still smelled like coffee and pancakes. The evidence of her kindness was everywhere. The clean counters, the folded blanket, the warmth that seemed to linger in the air. "Dad?" Kenny's voice pulled him back. "Are you going to eat?" Miss Rosalie made enough for an army. Brett looked at his son, at the hopeful expression on his young face, and felt something shift in his chest. Maybe Rosalie was right. Maybe he had been just surviving, moving through the motions without really living. Maybe it was time to try something different. He walked over to the table and sat down across from Kenny. As they cut into the pancakes, perfect, fluffy, nothing like the lumpy disasters he usually made. Brett thought about the woman who'd appeared in his kitchen, like some kind of guardian angel. He thought about the way she'd looked at him. Not with pity, but with understanding. He thought about the receipt in his pocket and the words written there, "For emergencies and pancakes." For the first time in 3 years, Brett Chandler felt something other than grief and exhaustion. He felt the tiniest flicker of hope. And while he wasn't ready to call it happiness, while he wasn't ready to move on from Rachel's memory, he was ready to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than surviving. The week moved strangely. The receipt stayed in his wallet, next to Rachel's photo. He didn't call. Fear and guilt kept him paralyzed. But Kenny talked about Miss Rosalie constantly. Friday evening, his phone buzzed. "Hi, Brett, this is Rosalie. I got your number from the restaurant database. Hope that's not too creepy. Just wanted to check in." Brett smiled. Not creepy. "Kenny hasn't stopped talking about your pancakes." Her reply came quickly. "How are you doing?" She cut through his deflection. Honestly. "Okay. Embarrassed, but okay." Rosalie wrote, "Nothing to be embarrassed about. Saturday nights must be hard." His throat tightened. She understood. "They are. But this Saturday I'll skip the bar. Maybe work in my workshop." After a pause, "If you want company that doesn't involve alcohol, I'm off tomorrow evening. Coffee or pancake lessons?" Before overthinking, he typed, "Pancake lessons. 6 o'clock at my place?" Saturday arrived bright. Brett cleaned frantically. At 6 sharp, the doorbell rang. Rosalie stood holding groceries, red hair down, wearing jeans and a green sweater. She smiled. "Ready to become a pancake master?" Kenny thundered down. "Miss Rosalie." "Come see my dinosaurs." He grabbed her hand, pulling her upstairs. Brett listened to his son's excited chatter. Something warm bloomed in his chest. Not guilt, but happiness. 20 minutes later, they were in the kitchen. Rosalie showed him how to fold ingredients gently, test the griddle, watch for bubbles. Kenny watched, fascinated. "You're a really good teacher." The first pancake was nearly perfect. Brett stared. "I did that?" Rosalie's smile was proud. "You did." By evening's end, Kenny fell asleep on the couch. Brett and Rosalie sat with coffee. "Thank you for this." Rosalie's expression grew thoughtful. "I like your son. You're doing a great job with him, Brett." The words hit hard. "It's hard. I never know if I'm doing the right thing. Rachel was good at this. I'm just trying." Rosalie shook her head. "You're not failing him. That kid adores you. Can I ask something? You only talk about what Rachel was to Kenny. But what about you? You lost your wife. You're allowed to grieve, too. If I let myself feel how much I miss her, I'm afraid I won't function. Kenny needs me functional." Rosalie reached across, covering his hand. "You don't have to have it all figured out. And you don't have to do it alone. I'd like to be your friend, Brett. Permission to be human, to be weak, to accept help. I'd like that too." They talked for another hour. Rosalie told him about foster care, her grandmother Helen, dreams of opening a bakery. Brett shared his guilt, his fears, his loneliness. When she finally stood to leave, it was midnight. At the door, she turned. "Same time next week?" Brett laughed. "You're going to turn me into a real cook." She hesitated, then hugged him. Quick, friendly. It had been so long. "See you next week, Brett Chandler." That night, he dreamed of red hair and kind smiles. When he woke, the weight on his chest felt lighter. Progress. Small and fragile, but progress. Weeks passed. Every Saturday, Rosalie came over. Kenny blossomed, more animated, confident. At work, his boss noticed. "You seem lighter." Brett couldn't suppress a smile. Things are good. And they were. For the first time since the accident, life felt like more than surviving. But not everyone was happy. 4 months in, Brett's in-laws made an unannounced visit. Frank and Margaret Winter stood on his porch, faces hard. Brett's stomach dropped. "We need to talk. About Kenny." They pushed inside. Margaret's eyes landed on Kenny's drawing. Him, Brett, and Rosalie holding hands. "My family," written across the top. Her face went red. "Who is this woman?" Brett's heart pounded. "She's a friend. She's been helping out." Frank stepped forward. "Our daughter's been dead 3 years. You've already replaced her with some waitress?" "I haven't replaced anyone," Brett said through gritted teeth. Rachel was my wife. I loved her. But she's gone. And I have to keep living. For Kenny. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. How can you do this to her memory? Brett felt his control slipping. Rosalie's been kind to us. She's helped Kenny smile again. Where were you these past 3 years? You moved to Florida. You call once a month. Rosalie has been here. We stayed away because it hurt, Margaret cried. But we thought you'd honor Rachel's memory. Brett's voice dropped. Dangerous. There are pictures of Rachel everywhere. Kenny and I visit her grave every month. I tell him stories about his mother every night. How dare you suggest I'm erasing her? Frank pulled out a document. Given your circumstances, long work hours, questionable company, we believe Kenny would be better off with us. We're prepared to petition for custody. The world stopped. They wanted to take Kenny. You can't be serious. Frank's voice was stone. We have resources you don't. A stable home. We can give Kenny the life Rachel would have wanted. Brett's voice shook. Rachel would have wanted him with his father. A small voice came from the stairs. Grandma? Grandpa? Why are you yelling? Kenny stood there, confused and scared. Brett forced calm. Your grandparents were just leaving. If you want to pursue this legally, do what you have to do. But get out of my house. After they left, after Kenny was in bed, Brett sat in darkness with his phone. He found Rosalie's number and pressed call. She answered. Brett, everything okay? No, nothing's okay. He told her everything. She listened, and when he finished, Brett, I care about you and Kenny a lot. But I won't be the reason you lose your son. His heart sank. What are you saying? Rosalie's voice was thick with tears. Maybe your in-laws are right. Maybe I've been selfish. Maybe Kenny needs stability more than his dad's friend. I think we need space. For Kenny's sake. Brett wanted to argue, but fear paralyzed him. I'm sorry, Brett, but this is the right thing. Take care of Kenny. Maybe someday things will be different. The line went dead. Brett sat in darkness, feeling the fragile happiness crumble. Kenny was all that mattered. Everything else was selfish indulgence. The next Saturday, Kenny asked where Miss Rosalie was. She's busy, buddy. She won't be coming around anymore. Kenny's face fell. Did I do something wrong? Brett pulled him close. No. Sometimes grown-up stuff is complicated. The weeks were gray and hollow. Brett worked until exhaustion, proving he was the stable father the winters demanded. Kenny grew quieter. The light faded from his eyes, and Brett hated himself for it. 2 months later, a Thursday call changed everything. An elderly woman's voice, shaky. Mr. Chandler, this is Helen Patterson, Rosalie's grandmother. She's in the hospital, collapsed at work, exhaustion and malnutrition. She's been working 3 jobs, won't eat, won't rest. I know it has something to do with you. Brett's heart stopped. Which hospital? He called his neighbor, then drove like his life depended on it. She lay in the hospital bed, IVs in her arms, small and pale. Brett? What are you doing here? Brett crossed the room, took her hand. Your grandmother called. What are you doing to yourself? Tears welled. I needed to stay busy. If I stayed busy, I didn't think about you, about Kenny, about how much I miss you both. Brett felt like someone had squeezed his heart. It wasn't right, Brett said, voice breaking. Kenny asked about you every day. He stopped drawing, stopped laughing. He went back to being the sad, quiet kid he was before you. Rosalie's face crumpled. Brett cut her off. And I stopped living again. But I was wrong. Kenny doesn't need a martyr. He needs a dad who's happy, who shows him that life can be good even after loss. What are you saying? Brett took a deep breath. I'm saying I care about you, more than I should. I'm terrified that caring means betraying Rachel. terrified that if I let myself be happy, something will take it away. But I'm more terrified of a life without you in it." Rosalie stared, tears streaming. "Your in-laws," Brett shook his head. "Let them do their worst. I'll fight them. You make us better, Rosalie. And I'm done pretending otherwise. But Rachel," Brett knew this was the heart of it. "Rachel would want me to be happy. She'd want Kenny to have people who love him. Loving you doesn't mean I love her less. My heart can hold both of you, the memory of what I had, and the hope of what could be." Rosalie sat up. "Brett, I need you to be sure. I can't compete with a ghost. If we do this, you have to want me, want us, not as a replacement, but as something new." Brett had never been more certain. "I want this. I want you. Not because you're a replacement, but because you're you." Rosalie Bennett, who rescued a drunk stranger and stayed to make sure he and his kid were okay. Who showed Kenny the world still has kindness. He kissed her hand. "I want you in our lives. As yourself." For a long moment, Rosalie just looked at him. Then she pulled him closer and kissed him. Soft and tentative, tasting like tears and hope. For the first time since Rachel died, kissing someone didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like coming home to a different house, unfamiliar but welcoming. When they pulled apart, "Your in-laws are going to be furious." Brett laughed. "Let them be. We'll deal with them together, all three of us. No more working yourself to death. Promise me." Rosalie nodded. "Promise. How's Kenny really doing?" Brett's chest tightened. "He misses you. Every day. Once you're better, come home with me. Let's tell him together that you're back. For good this time." Rosalie was released 3 days later. The moment Kenny saw her, he launched himself into her arms. "Miss Rosalie, you're back. I missed you every single day." At home, over dinner, Brett brought up the difficult subject. "Kenny, you know Grandma and Grandpa Winters want you to live with them?" Kenny's face clouded. "I don't want to. I want to live with you. And Miss Rosalie, we're a family. Families stay together." Brett's throat tightened. "Yes, we're a family. And we're going to stay together. But it might be hard." Kenny reached across, took both their hands. "Then we fight back. You tell me to stand up for what's right. This is right. I love Grandma and Grandpa, but you're my dad, and Miss Rosalie makes you happy. That's what Mom would want." True to their threat, the Winters filed for custody. Brett hired attorney Patricia Hayes. "They don't have much of a case. You're employed. Home is suitable. Kenny's thriving. We need character witnesses." Jennifer Marsh, Rachel's best friend, agreed to testify. "You look happy," she told Brett. "Rachel made me promise to make sure you didn't stop living. I'll testify. I'll tell the court what Rachel would have wanted, for Kenny to stay with his father." The hearing day arrived. The Winters brought financial statements, photos of their Florida home. But Brett's side came prepared. Jennifer testified about Rachel's wishes. Kenny's teacher spoke about his improvement since Rosalie. Brett's boss praised his dedication. When Brett testified, he kept his voice steady. "I loved my wife. I'll always love her. But she's gone. I have to live in the present. Rosalie is kind, caring, selfless. My son deserves people like that in his life." After 2 days, the judge would rule within a week. Then Patricia called. "Custody remains with you. No evidence of harm or neglect. Kenny is thriving. Your relationship with Rosalie appears healthy and stable. The petition is denied." Brett sank into a chair. "We won." They celebrated that evening at the Pine Corner, where it all began. Kenny talked excitedly about never doubting they'd win. Later, at the door, Brett stopped Rosalie. "Move in with us, you and Helen. I want to wake up with you here. I want us to be a real family." Rosalie stared. Are you sure? Brett cupped her face. I love you, Rosalie Bennett. I should have said it weeks ago. I love you. Because you're you. Because you make my life better, just by being in it. Tears streamed down her face. I love you too. I've loved you for months. She kissed him. Helen and I will move in, but I'm not taking Rachel's place. Her pictures stay up. Her memory stays alive. I'm just adding to the story. Brett nodded. That's all I want. Creating something new while honoring what came before. 6 months later, on what would have been Rachel and Brett's 9th wedding anniversary, 3 people stood at Rachel's grave. Brett held white roses. Kenny stood between him and Rosalie, holding their hands. Hi, Mom, Kenny said. I brought you flowers. We're doing good. Dad's happy now. Rosalie takes care of us, but she says you'll always be my real mom. I think you'd like her. Brett knelt next to his son, hand on the cold marble. Hey, Rach, I hope you're not mad. I hope you understand. You'll always be my first love. But Rosalie is my second chance, and I think you'd want me to take it. Rosalie stepped forward. Hi, Rachel. I promise I'll take care of them. Not because I'm replacing you, but because they deserve to be loved, and I love them so much. Thank you for creating this family. I'm just trying to build on what you started. On the drive home, Kenny asked, Dad, do you think Mom knows about Rosalie? Brett glanced in the rearview mirror. I think she does, buddy, and I think she's happy for us. That evening, Brett stood in his workshop looking at his latest project, a shadow box with 3 compartments. In one, a photo of Rachel. In another, a recent picture of him, Rosalie, and Kenny. The third was empty, waiting for future memories. Rosalie found him, slipping her arms around his waist. That's beautiful. Rachel in her place, us in ours, and room for what's to come. Brett turned to face her. I've been thinking about making this official, about rings and promises. Rosalie's eyes went wide. Not yet, he said quickly. But maybe soon? I want to do it right. Ask Kenny first. But I want you to know that's where my head is. Rosalie kissed him. I'll wait. But yes, that's where I want to be too. With you. With Kenny. With this beautiful, imperfect family we've created. Helen called that dinner was ready. Kenny came running. The ordinary chaos of family life swirled around them. Brett thought about how far he'd come. From the broken man who'd woken to find a stranger in his kitchen, to someone who could imagine a future again, who could love again, who could be happy again. That night, Brett lay in bed thinking about Rachel, about the life they'd planned, about Rosalie, about the life they were building, about Kenny, who'd taught him that hearts could hold multiple truths at once, grief and joy, memory and hope, loss and love. The hangover that had brought Rosalie into his life seemed like a lifetime ago. That had been a different Brett, a man who'd given up on everything except survival. The man he was now had learned that surviving wasn't enough, that life demanded more, connection, vulnerability, the courage to love even when you knew how much losing hurt. It was terrifying, but it was also the only way forward. As sleep claimed him, Brett's last thought was of that morning, stumbling into his kitchen, finding a stranger making pancakes, hearing the words that would change everything. You don't remember anything, do you? She'd asked. But he remembered now. Every moment, every conversation, every small step that had led them here. And he wouldn't change a single thing. Because some mornings, you wake up with a hangover and find a stranger in your kitchen. And if you're very lucky, that stranger turns out to be the person who helps you find your way back to life, who shows you that love doesn't run out, that hearts can heal, that families come in all forms, who proves that even in your darkest moment, when you think you've lost everything that matters, there's still hope, still possibility, still love waiting to be found. Brett Chandler had woken up expecting nothing but pain. Instead, he'd found everything he didn't know he needed, and that made all the difference.